All right, I want to welcome our energy panel back for another segment of The Mix. We have Frank Maisano here from Bracewell, Giuliani, also Peter Lehner, NRDC's Executive Director, remote from New York City. Thank you both for joining us again here. So we're talking about E15. The White House announces higher levels of ethanol will be allowed in cars of certain model years. Now, the average life of a car is 15 to 17 years. This is good for the ethanol industry, makers of corn, if we're talking corn ethanol, growers of cellulosic ethanol, opposed by some automakers, livestock ranchers, some oil refiners. Frank, you say this was mostly a political call.
Yeah, this is politics, election year politics at its highest level. There are a number of members of Congress who are in deep trouble around the country, many Democrats in rural areas who voted for health care bills or climate change bills that are getting pressure. They need something to go back to people, and the administration clearly at this time, after several delays and still not enough science on this issue, has decided to just come out and make an announcement, and kind of a half-a-loaf announcement. So
only a few model years.
Only a few model years of the newer cars, which, you know, obviously the auto industry will say, you know, you can't do them for some and do them for others because people go to the same gas pumps. And that inevitably leads to the biggest problem with this issue, which is an infrastructure issue. We saw this with E85. The ethanol in 85%. When you bought flexible fuel vehicles, people still chose to put regular gasoline in there because there weren't any E85 pumps available to them.
What do you see happening, Peter? Somebody pulls into a gas station, they have to already know my car takes this E15, so I have to go to a special pump. Is there a consumer acceptance issue?
Well, I think there's both a consumer acceptance issue, and even if they accept it, are they going to always know what's to do the right thing? And of course, then what we don't know, what we fear is that when you burn higher mixtures of ethanol, there'll be more pollutant and more concern for public health and the environment. Another big trouble here is that this ultimately is just increasing the use of corn-based ethanol, which right now is really not a very good product for the environment. We had all hopes that ethanol might be a step forward in cleaner fuels, but when you look at the whole life cycle of corn-based ethanol, it's really a pretty dirty fuel. And until we can find much cleaner fuels where you maybe make it from waste rather than corn and other food stocks, we really have to be very careful about increasing the use of this type of fuel.
And certainly the most incredible opportunities that lie in this arena are with cellulosic ethanol and biofuels. And just the problem of development has been so slow, even in places where we have it. You know, and this is fuel from waste, as Peter was talking about, fuels from waste, fuels from other types of materials that aren't as energy intensive or pollutant intensive. So those are the real opportunities. The problem is the development curve has been very slow because of a number of reasons, including the loan guarantee problems with getting money to places where there's shovel-ready projects that could start. So all of those delays are inevitably hampering our ability to move cellulosic biofuels sooner, which of course gives us a need to fill mandates that are required by government, and they lean on the corn industry to do that.
This does indicate, though, even though it's a decision only for a few model years, that this is a move toward E15 becoming standard. I want to move on to another topic here. We talked earlier about offshore drilling. I want to talk a little bit now about offshore wind, because we know that Google is now investing massive amounts in this backbone transmission project up and down the Atlantic coast. Frank, I know your firm represents Transelectric, just to let the folks know that. Does it look like we are heading down? Is this finally the beginning of the commercialization, the scaling up of offshore wind?
Yeah, I really think this is a great opportunity for development of a offshore wind industry, a large offshore wind industry that can viably tap the vast resources that we have out there. There's some 60,000 megawatts out there available according to studies by the National Renewable Energy Lab, DOE, and places like that. We can tap those, but we can't get the power to where it needs to go in a lot of cases. And so more than just a handful of projects, if we want to have a large industry, we're going to have a transmission system like this that can take that power and move it to the places where it's going to be needed.
And bring the cost down to where this is not a wind project, this is a transmission project.
Right. And
this will enable the wind projects to start?
It will enable the wind projects to collect their power and move it up and down in a more efficient way, which will also help not only with intermittency issues and stuff and issues like that, but it will also help the reliability of the grid in PJM.
Peter, what about the idea that this is going to facilitate more than just the transmission of wind, and that if this goes up and down the East Coast, we're going to be seeing these lines carry conventional power, including coal, up north?
Well, that's part of what the whole planning process needs to ensure. One of the great things that happened recently is President Obama announced a national oceans policy, which provides for what's called marine spatial planning, basically trying to figure out what should happen in different parts of the ocean. Some parts of the ocean are really great for wind, for example, and others perhaps should be off limits to wind and are better important for fisheries. And the mixture of the actual physical transmission line plus the planning and that this new policy allows will, I hope, ensure that it will be clean energy coming in and not dirty energy. People are afraid sometimes that wind energy is more expensive, but again, they're not thinking about how expensive coal energy really is. The thousands of people that die from coal-fired pollution, the millions of asthma attacks, the global warming pollution, the mercury pollution, the toxic pollution, all of that is part of the real cost of coal-fired electricity, and that's what this wind project will allow to bring on board. Some
coal-fired electricity is also a very affordable type of electricity. You can't argue how expensive offshore wind is.
One of the important things, one of the important things about this, and Peter's colleagues throughout the environmental community have realized this, is that the way the PJM, the grid operator in the Mid-Atlantic, operates is that it will be very easy to push coal off of that line just by establishing it as with a handful of wind projects to be able to do it.
If the wind projects start up, I mean, look at Cape Wind, it was 10 years.
But that's where the regulatory changes and this new policy will really help. Cape Wind was the first big project, so of course it takes a little longer. We're all hoping that the next projects will happen a lot more quickly.
What about the idea that Google is doing this? They find it an investment opportunity, a company that's not even involved in wind.
Well, Google is, well, they started to get involved in wind and some solar and things
traditional businesses.
Google has taken a real aggressive leap into renewable energies, but Rick Needham, one of the gentlemen who was at the conference yesterday, said, look, Google takes big bets on big projects that will be big to our energy future. And clearly what they've decided here is that this approach, which can be the catalyst for organizing this vast offshore industry to tap those resources, will be something that needs the seed money, that is very high risk right now, but needs the seed money to be able to make a big difference in the future, and that's what they've chosen to do.
Certainly, and a lot of it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Frank Maisano from Bracewell and Giuliani, Peter Lehner from NRDC, thank you so much to both of you for your insights.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Susan.